In September of 1988, a marine biologist walked onto a remote, uninhabited atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a place so isolated it doesn't even have fresh water. And within 30 minutes of stepping onto the beach, he found something that stopped him cold. A wrecked boat, half buried. Faded letters on the hull, and when he got close enough to read them, he realized he recognized this boat. He had searched for it before, nearly 10 years earlier, thousands of miles away. 100 yards from the wreck, his team found something else. A grave, hand-built, marked with a cross made of driftwood. But only one man was in it. 4 others were never found, and to this day, nobody can fully explain how any of it got there. This is the story of 5 friends who went fishing on a calm February morning, and the mystery that has haunted a small Hawaiian town for over 40 years. To understand this story, you have to understand Hana. In 1979, Hana was, and still is, one of the most remote towns in Hawaii. Tucked on the eastern edge of Maui, cut off from the rest of the island by miles of winding coastal road, Hana was a tight-knit community where everybody knew everybody. 5 men from that community were about to become part of one of Hawaii's most enduring unsolved mysteries. Ralph Malayakini, Scott Mormon, Benjamin Kalama, Patrick Wasner, and Peter Hanchett. They weren't professional fishermen. They were construction workers, friends who worked together during the week and spent their free time in the water, surfing, diving, and fishing along a coastline they knew well. On the morning of February 11th, 1979, the 5 men borrowed a boat. It belonged to Ralph's twin brother Robert, a 17-foot Boston whaler named the Sarah Joe, after their parents. It was practically new. The sky was clear. The water was calm, almost glassy. It looked like a perfect day to be out on the ocean. Their plan took them across the Alenuihaha Channel, a stretch of water between Maui and the Big Island known among locals for deep water and unpredictable, powerful currents. Even experienced boaters treat that channel with caution. But that morning the weather gave no warning of what was coming. By mid-morning, 5 friends motored out of Hana Bay, expecting a normal day on the water. They were never seen again. Before we go further into what happened next, if you're new here, this is Real Crime Chronicles, where we dig into real, documented mysteries like this one. If a story like this deserves more attention, hit subscribe, drop a like, and let us know in the comments what you think happened. It genuinely helps us keep telling these stories properly. Now, back to the Sarah Joe. When the 5 men didn't return that evening, alarm spread quickly through Hana. Word got out. Family members, friends, and the wider community mobilized almost immediately. The Coast Guard launched a search. Boats and aircraft scanned the channel and the surrounding waters for any sign of the Sarah Joe. Wreckage, a life jacket, anything. Days passed. Then weeks. The official search was eventually called off without finding a single trace of the boat or the men aboard it, but the community didn't stop. Families pooled their own resources to keep searching remote coastlines and outer islands, hoping for any sign at all. Nothing turned up. Not the boat, not the men, not even debris. For a boat that size, in that kind of channel, that in itself was unusual, and it left the town of Hana with a wound that never fully closed. No bodies, no wreckage, no answers. Just 5 empty chairs at 5 family tables. The case went cold. Officially, the presumption was that the Sarah Joe had capsized or been swamped in the channel and sunk with all 5 men aboard. For almost 10 years, that was where the story ended. Then, in September of 1988, nearly a decade later, a research team arrived at Taongi Atoll, part of the Marshall Islands, more than 2,000 miles southwest of Hawaii. They weren't looking for the Sarah Joe. They were surveying the atoll for a wildlife sanctuary, studying seabirds and turtles on one of the most isolated pieces of land on Earth. One of the scientists on that team was John Naughton, a marine biologist who, by striking coincidence, had helped lead the original search for the Sarah Joe back in 1979. Within half an hour of stepping onto the beach, Naughton spotted something half buried in the sand. A boat, weathered, broken down by years of sun and salt, but recognizable. He could still make out part of the registration lettering, the letters Hey A, standing for Hawaii. It was the Sarah Joe. About 100 yards from the wreck, the team found something that raised even more questions. A shallow grave, marked with a handmade cross built from driftwood. Human remains, partially exposed. forensic experts from the Army Central Identification Lab in Honolulu later examined the remains using dental records and DNA. They confirmed the bones belonged to Scott Moorman, only Moorman, not the other 4 men. 2 months later, his family laid him to rest at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Los Angeles, nearly a decade after he'd disappeared on what was supposed to be an ordinary fishing trip. But the discovery didn't close the case. If anything, it opened up a whole new set of questions. The grave wasn't a natural resting place. It had clearly been built, deliberately, by human hands. And investigators found something unexpected buried alongside Moorman's remains: sheets of paper, interleaved with small squares of silver foil. To be clear, this detail is where documented fact ends and theory begins. Some researchers have pointed out that this resembles a tradition found in certain Chinese and Taiwanese burial customs, where joss paper, sometimes layered with foil, is placed with the dead as a symbolic offering for the afterlife. If that theory holds, it would suggest that someone, possibly fishermen from a foreign vessel operating in that remote part of the Pacific, potentially without authorization, found Moorman's remains, or found him still aboard the drifting boat, and chose to bury him according to their own customs, then left without ever reporting it to any authority. We want to be careful here. That is speculation, not confirmed fact. No one has ever been identified as the person who built that grave. There's also the matter of the ocean itself. Experts who modeled Pacific currents concluded that wind and drift patterns could plausibly carry an unmanned or disabled boat from Hawaii's channel all the way to the Marshall Islands, a journey they estimated could take around 3 months. That explanation accounts for distance. It doesn't fully account for precision. Taongi Atoll has only one narrow passage through its surrounding reef where a boat can actually enter the lagoon. The odds of a drifting, unmanned vessel finding that one gap by chance struck many investigators as extraordinarily unlikely. And then there's the timeline itself. Some accounts point to an earlier government survey of the atoll, conducted around 1984 or 1985, several years before Naughton's discovery, that reportedly did not document any wreck or grave on the island. If that account is accurate, it raises an unresolved question. Was the Sarah Joe already there and simply missed? Or did it arrive sometime after that survey, years after the men vanished? Neither answer fully fits the evidence we have, and this remains one of the most debated parts of the story. What we do know for certain, the boat and one man's remains were found together, thousands of miles from home, under circumstances no one has ever fully explained. We're going to get into the leading theories in a moment, but if you've been enjoying how we're laying this case out, this is a good moment to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next case we cover. And if you've got a theory of your own forming already, drop it in the comments. We read every one. So what actually happened to the men of the Sarah Joe? Over the decades, a handful of theories have emerged. None of them are confirmed. All of them have holes. Theory 1. The storm took them all, and the boat drifted for years afterward. Under this theory, the boat capsized, or was swamped, in the Alenuihaha Channel, and either the men were lost at sea immediately, or the boat somehow stayed afloat, empty, or nearly empty, and drifted with ocean currents for the better part of a decade, before finally washing onto Taongi. This fits the physical evidence of a badly weathered boat, but it doesn't explain the presence of a body still aboard, or account for why only one man's remains were ever recovered. Theory 2. At least one man survived the initial storm, only to die during the drift. This version suggests Moorman, or possibly more than one of the men, survived the storm itself and remained with the boat as it drifted, only to succumb to exposure, dehydration, or starvation at some point during the following weeks or months. This would explain why remains were found in connection with the boat, though it still leaves the fate of the other 4 men completely unresolved. Theory 3. Unreported foreign fishing vessels found the boat and buried Moorman. This is the theory most tied to the foil and paper detail. The idea that a fishing crew, potentially operating illegally in that stretch of the Pacific, encountered the drifting boat or its lone occupant, performed a respectful burial according to their own customs, and never came forward, likely to avoid drawing attention to their own presence in restricted waters. Theory 4. The timeline itself is wrong. This theory questions whether the boat and grave were really sitting undiscovered on Taongi for the better part of a decade, or whether the reported 1984-85 survey simply missed them. meaning the true series of events during those missing years may be very different from the straightforward, drifted for 9 years narrative most retellings use. None of these theories can be fully proven, and crucially, not one of them explains what happened to Ralph Malayakini, Benjamin Kalama, Patrick Wosner, or Peter Hanchett. Their fate remains completely unknown. No further remains, no additional wreckage, no evidence of any kind connected to the other 4 men has ever been found, on Taongi or anywhere else. More than 40 years later, the disappearance of the Sarajevo remains one of Hawaii's most enduring unsolved mysteries. In 1989, the case was featured on the television series Unsolved Mysteries, bringing it to a national audience, but the publicity never produced the answers the families were hoping for. No new witnesses came forward, no new evidence emerged. In Hana, the story never really faded. A memorial marking the loss of the 5 men still stands near the harbor where the Sarajevo set out that morning in 1979. For the families who lost sons, brothers, and husbands that day, there was never a clean resolution, only a boat that came home without its crew, and a single grave built by hands nobody has ever identified. What actually happened out on that water, and in the years the Sarajevo spent adrift before washing up on a lonely Pacific atoll, may never be fully known. Sometimes the ocean keeps its secrets. If you have a theory about what happened to the other 4 men, or what you make of that grave and the foil-lined papers found inside it, we'd genuinely like to hear it. Leave it in the comments below. Thanks for watching this one all the way through. If you want to keep digging into real, documented mysteries like this with us, subscribe to Real Crime Chronicles, hit that like button, and let us know in the comments which unsolved case we should cover next. We'll see you in the next one.